Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, dwyerboxingnews.com. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. I made a series of earlier videos where I made the statement that there's no money in boxing. Now, I'm actually trying to do public service because I get emails from young guys who are thinking about getting in the game. And all they're hearing about is the big money in boxing, the big boxing purses, and all they're seeing on shows like 24/7 are champions throwing around a bunch of money, rumors of champions betting hundreds of thousands of dollars on sporting events, right? Bling, entourages, limousines, the life. Well, what I want everyone to do right now is to look at the numbers released by the Nevada State Athletic Commission concerning the gate for the rematch of Brandon Rios versus Mike Alvarado. Now keep in mind, this was a rematch of a great fight. The reason we had the rematch was because the first fight was a classic. Understand, too, that both guys had been on TV before, right? Mike Alvarado was on TV fighting people like Britas Prescott and Ray Narr. Brandon Rios, of course, was on TV fighting a bunch of people, right? Murray, Richard Abril, other big-time talent. So both of these guys were known. It was a title fight. You're talking about very connected fighters, right? Bob Arum, Top Rank, was involved, perhaps the game's biggest promoter. So if there was a fight that should generate a huge gate, right, that didn't involve a Mayweather, a Klitschko, a Hay, a Chavez Jr., then it should have been this fight. It might stun some people to know that this fight only sold 4,515 tickets, right? Incredibly, 5,537 tickets went unsold. In other words, they had less than half capacity at this fight. And of course, the gate, right, the live gate, was only $548,000, right? In other words, just a little bit more than $500,000 for the game. When you're on YouTube and you're watching the fights of contenders or champions such as these guys, what I want you to do is to look at the crowd. Don't look at the ring. Look at the crowd. You're going to see that often these fights are fought in practically empty arenas, right? It's very rare when you get situations where a fighter can sell out stadiums like Vladimir Klitschko, or where there's a boxing venue, the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, the Bell Center in Canada, that routinely gets boxing crowds of more than 10,000 people. That's rare, right? This is more typical of what life is really like. By the way, let me point out too that this fight actually drew more fans than the Roy Jones-Bernard Hopkins rematch. And Hopkins, as I make this video, is still a world-class fighter. In fact, as I make this video, he's one of the light heavyweight champions. When you listen to interviews with older fighters, guys who were in the game and guys who were elite fighters, like former heavyweight champion Larry Holmes. Larry Holmes is very upfront in saying that boxing is unlike any other sport because you have to give away half your money. Right? Understand that the Virgil Hunters, the Nacho Beristains, the Freddie Roaches, These guys are not working for peanuts. You're paying them big time money. And when you see, let's say, an LA based trainer like Freddie Roach, and he's with a fighter in Las Vegas on fight night or Atlantic City on fight night, you need to understand that somebody is paying the expenses. The money these guys get isn't like professional team sports where I pay you $1 million, you break off some change, maybe 5% for your agent, and then you're banking the rest. You're just sharing it with Uncle Sam, right? As I've said before, boxers need to realize that they're breaking off some for their manager. They're breaking off some for their promoter. They're breaking off some for their trainer. They're breaking off some for their sparring partners. They're breaking off some for their cut men, right? If you factor in health costs, then you're really up against it. So what boxing really is, and I'm a big fan of the action, don't get me wrong, but as a business, it's terrible, right? What boxing really is a series of concerts. But there's a difference. Brandon Rios and Mike Alvarado put on an event. They drew a crowd. Both of the guys left the ring looking beat up. Mike Alvarado can't, no matter how good his performance was, can't show up the next night and do a concert the next day. Right? In fact, Brandon Rios and Mike Alvarado can't do that until their wounds heal, until they get clearance from a boxing commission. That could take 30 days, that could take 60 days, that could take 90 days, if not more, right? These deep cuts, think about the deep cuts that require stitches, right? If you're in a sport where you're getting hit, you can't fight. In fact, they won't allow you to fight until those wounds heal. The fight's not credible if you walk in the ring and you already have a gaping wound over your eye that's bleeding, right? The fans won't go for it. The gamblers won't go for it. Now that's very different than, let's say, Jay-Z. Because Jay-Z, musicians, elite artists, they'll go on tour, right? Not just an event, but literally a series of dates. And as Jay-Z's on stage, no one's trying to hit him upside the head, right? It's expected that he's going to finish the concert looking just like he did when that concert started. So musicians can literally play on consecutive nights. They can visit a town. It's not just a one-off event before half capacity. If it's a big-time band, Bon Jovi, they'll roll in a town, they'll do a few nights, it'll be a sellout, right? And the guys, of course, can keep it going. So my point to you is, if you're thinking about getting into boxing, you need to realize how uphill it is, right? Many of the contenders have day jobs. Let me go one step further. As you see a boxing interview, understand that many times, not some, but many times, the interviewer makes more money annually than the fighter, right? Understand, as you're seeing a presentation, some of the best paid people in boxing are people like Michael Buffer and commentators like Jim Lampley, right? So as a fighter, you need to understand that it's only an elite few who have access to television, who rule the roost financially, right? History is littered with many great fighters who ran into financial trouble after their careers. Just Google some of the biggest names from the 1980s. You're going to find out about tax liens, about forced sale of assets, about lawsuits, the whole 9 yards, right? And so there is no money in boxing for most of the people. Manny Pacquiao, Floyd Mayweather, Klitschko, sure, those guys are paid handsomely. But understand, there's a reason why even an elite fighter who's been in the game for an awfully long time, like Bernard Hopkins, talks about the fact that the money he's getting now is back pay. Because back in the day, even when he was middleweight champ in the late 90s, he wasn't making big money. I mean, understand, I remember a while ago, Genaro Hernandez in an interview, former champion. In fact, he's the guy who Floyd beat for Floyd's first title. I remember listening to an interview where Genaro Hernandez, who was an excellent fighter, elite fighter, champion, was talking about the difficult time he was having qualifying for a home loan. Because how do you explain to the banker that you expect to continue to be able to make payments? Or if you lose a fight and you lose your title, then you're literally going from making championship money to fighting before very empty arenas, right? So I know many of you responded to the earlier video saying, Dwyer, you're crazy, yada, yada, yada. Tell me I'm crazy after you look at the official numbers from the Nevada State Athletic Commission on this Mike Alvarado, Brandon Rios rematch. The first fight's a classic. The fighters are known. They've been on TV before. They couldn't even draw 5,000 fans. Is it possible that this sport is primarily a TV sport and that it's extremely difficult to draw even 5,000 fans? Understand too, if it weren't for TV, if all they were doing was splitting the live gate, and let's face it, that's the vast majority of fights. Only a few fighters are on TV. They would be splitting a pot of $548,000, right? $548,000. My point to you is simply, if you split this right down the middle, each fighter would take home about $275,000, right? For their camps, not even for them. Is $275,000 enough to get as beaten up as Mike Alvarado was in that fight? Just look at his eyes. Let me point out too, you get hit that much in the eyes, you could easily end up with long-term eye troubles. Understand, Abner Maris is coming back from an attached retina. Ray Leonard had an attached retina. Several fighters have had an attached retina. Some former champions have gone blind. Layman Brewster, right? You remember Calvin Brock, the contender who fought Vladimir Klitschko, the boxing banker? Eye trouble, partial blindness in an eye, is what took him out of the game. He still wanted to continue his career. Google his numbers. Now, is $275,000. And keep in mind, Alvarado is toward the top of the game, right? He's fighting in title fights on television. Is $275,000 enough? In fact, let's make it even bigger. Is $300,000 enough to get beaten up like Mike Alvarado, knowing that Mike Alvarado is not going to fight again for several months, right? It's not $300 for one night. It's $300 for a training camp, making weight. You're already invested 3-4 months for that $300,000, and of course that $300,000 would have to carry you for your recuperation, right, as you recover from the wounds. Well, keep in mind, of the $300,000, let's say Alvarado has to part with $150,000, right? Because, of course, he has a trainer, he has a team, he has a manager, he has a promoter. Someone did great work to get him on HBO, televised, in a way that most fighters aren't. So let's say he parts with $150,000 off the top. So for his troubles, he gets $150,000. Knock, knock. There's Uncle Sam. He's getting less than that. Right? Now keep in mind, this is a fighter with a live gate of 548,000. In fact, let's round it up to 600,000. But what about your typical fight with gates of $100,000? If that. Right? Fights taking place not in Las Vegas like this fight did, but in Boise, Idaho, or in smaller towns all across this country, Norman, Oklahoma, right? It's rough sledding. Don't be fooled because we're seeing the tip of the iceberg on TV. The Mayweathers, the Chavez Juniors, the guys who've actually reached the top of the mountain. Understand that mountain is like Mount Everest, and most guys never see serious money. And some of the guys who actually are just about to break into the big time end up with serious health problems. Boxing's a dangerous sport, really. And the question, if you're thinking about being a professional boxer, is whether or not it's financially worth it if your career doesn't ignite right away. There are some boxers out there, Tony Thompson comes to mind, who were late bloomers, Sergio Martinez, who were late bloomers, who came into the sport at the bottom level late, and then were able to rise to the heights where they are today, right? All I'm saying is those guys, quite frankly, are needles in haystacks. Let me hear from you. Leave your comments for me here online. Visit us at DwyerBoxingNews.com. By the way, the numbers on the Alvarado Rios fight can be found on an excellent website that I pub all the time, BoxingScene.com. Thanks for watching.